Welcome back to College Basketball Recruiting Weekly, and we have an exciting show for you here this week as both Dariq Bossi and Travis Branham will be joining me. And we're going to start with a look back at the class of 2022. In fact, we are going to re-rank the class. It's been about 9 months since our final rankings came out. There were 25 five-star prospects, and we are going to reassess that class. Then we're going to introduce a new segment called What's Got You Teed Up? And this is going to be something that we're a little teed up about this week, and it's going to fall on Travis Branham's shoulders to break that down. Then the college basketball game of the week is Duke and North Carolina, one of the greatest rivalries in the entire sport. We're going to preview that matchup. And finally, a look ahead to another major commitment on the horizon in the class of 2024. This week on 24/7 Sports, we've spent a lot of time looking back on the class of 2022. There were 25 five-star prospects in that class. 23 of them began the college season as potential one-and-done first-round picks on the draftables. Now, we're going to re-rank the entire class. And in order to do that, we're going to bring in both Dariq Bossi and Travis Branham. And the three of us are going to break down our list. Fellas, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
All right, so here's what we did. As you know, we went through and each of us came up with our own top 10, and then we came up with the average. And now there were some discrepancies along the way, but it shouldn't be a major surprise. We all had the same player at the top of the class. We all had the same number 2 as well. So, Bossi, I'm going to start with you. We all had Mr. Miller. He's had a heck of a freshman season at Alabama in the number 1 spot. What has changed in the last year?
With Brandon Miller, I don't know if it's necessarily a change or some great revelation, but there's a lot of things that gone on. Number one, he's ended up in a perfect spot for him in the way he plays. Their free-flowing offense, their total freedom given to shoot as many threes as you want, and just a need for a guy to step in and be a big scorer for NATO has been a huge case for him. He's gotten more mature like other guys. I think he was maybe a little bit more physically ready than some of the other freshmen in America. And, it's just turned out he's a little bit better than we thought he was. It's not like we thought Brandon Miller was a slouch. We thought he was a top 15 player in the country. It's just turned out that so far he's the best freshman in the country and looks like he could have been the number 1 player in our rankings.
Now, ironically, the player who finished as number 1 in our rankings was his EYBL teammate, and that's Nick Smith. Now, we haven't seen the best of Nick Smith. We haven't seen much of Nick Smith at all this year because of the injury. But all three of us still had him in our top 2. So, Travis, I'll send it over to you. What made him still a top 2 prospect in the class for you?
To be honest, this is something that we all talk about behind the scenes all the time. If you're wanting to get that number 1 spot, you frankly got to go take it. And I don't think any of these other guys, these other freshmen, have gone and taken this spot from Nick Smith. Kyle Filipowski has had a tremendous freshman year, but Brandon Miller has been the star. And you can't really punish a Nick Smith who's been out with an injury. We don't know when he will be back. But the thing is, when he got to play, right now, if you look at his stats, they're not super impressive, averaging only 12 points a game, roughly 5 rebounds or assists. But in 2 of those games, he was hurt, and he played very, very minimal roles in those games. So when you look at the full games he was actually able to play, he put up big numbers. There's still so much to like about Nick Smith as a competitor. And I do believe that if there was any chance he would be on the court right now, he would absolutely be out there tearing it up this season.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I would also say in the 6 games we've seen him play so far, I don't think he's been 100% in any of them. I mean, there was a lot of talk about, how much pressure was he putting on the rim offensively. And to me, he was just never at full speed, never showed that full burst that we saw increasingly throughout high school as we saw his conditioning continue to improve. All right, so we were aligned on the top 2, but the drama begins at number 3. Now, you two were aligned at number 3. You both had Kyle Filipowski in that spot, unless I am mistaken. So he finished 3rd in our cumulative ranking. So I'll give you guys both a quick shot on this one. What was it about Flip that has him in the top 3 for you?
I'll start off. I think it's got to be his production. He's been way up there, averaging nearly a double-double a night. He's reliable in late game situations. Look at Duke against Wake Forest the other night. When they needed someone to step up and make a play late in the game, Kyle Filipowski stepped up and made plays, whether it was hitting a big 3, getting loose off an inbound play, or a big transition dunk. And what's so good about how Flip has been playing is that coming out of the summer, there seemed to be a lot of concern about he was going to be this highly touted Duke freshman that might not be ready to go. And as it turns out, he's been the best of their freshmen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Bossi. Kyle Filipowski has been the best freshman for this Duke team throughout the entire season. He has had some ups and downs, but that's expected when it goes to any single freshman out there. But he's been coming up big in some big moments for Duke this season. And when you have guys like Dariq Whitehead, who's been hurt, Dariq Lively, who battled injury, and he's really having a hard time finding his rhythm and who he is as a college player. And also with Tyrese Proctor, another five-star guy that has struggled to find his confidence this season, although he is really finding that confidence and rhythm as of late. Kyle Filipowski has been the star of this team, and he has been the engine that's kept them running, as, again, they've been battling injury issues, Jeremy Roach included.
Now, rounding out the top 5 was Grady Dick at Kansas and Keyonte George at Baylor, and both of those prospects were highest on my board. Grady Dick, I think, in Ebos, you've seen him longer than anybody, but for me, it's the fact that his shooting has translated from day one, and he's been able to impact winning. Both of these guys, that's really the story, because Kansas and Baylor winning at a very high level, Baylor continuing to figure it out as the season goes on. We see a lot of these freshmen being able to put up numbers. Some of them are impacting winning. Miller is the one who checks both of those numbers, but to me, after that, it's Grady Dick and it's Keyonte George. I think Grady Dick is going to translate to the next level as a floor spacer. I think he's been better defensively, at least than I expected. And the shot making obviously translates. Speaking of shot making, Keyonte George has gotten himself into just vastly different shape than he was as a high school senior. And some of the shots he's making right now, I mean, he's playing with a lot of confidence. He's taking some shots with incredibly high degrees of difficulty. But I just see him evolving into that scoring combo that we see so much at the NBA level. After that top 5, next on the board was Cason Wallace. And so, Trav, I think he was highest on your board individually. What have you liked about the Kentucky guard so far?
It's the same thing that we have always liked and loved about Cason Wallace. It's just he's an absolute warrior when he is on the court. There's not many guards who can defend the perimeter and on the ball like he can. Honestly, there may not be another better defender out there that is on the ball like Cason Wallace. He's a guy, anytime that there is a loose ball or a rebound up for grabs, if Oscar Tshiebwe isn't coming down with it, you can absolutely bet that Cason Wallace is going to come up with that ball. And then on the offensive end, he's really improved as a shooter. He is not this dynamic go-to scorer that Kentucky and John Calipari are used to having. So if you go look at his numbers, his offensive numbers are not always going to blow you away, but that's just not who he is. But he has been extremely impactful on both ends of the court all year long for this Kentucky team as they continue to try to find out just how good they are and if they can make a deep March run. And a lot of that is going to be dependent upon the play of Cason Wallace.
All right, so the re-ranking for the class of 2022, it begins with Brandon Miller at 1. Number 2 is Nick Smith. Number 3, Kyle Filipowski. Number 4, Grady Dick. Keyonte George at 5. Cason Wallace at 6. And at number 7, a player who will have moved up in this re-ranking is Anthony Black. We were all pretty high on him. I think I had him highest on my board. I've been impressed by how he's matured a little bit as a scorer. Still has some room to grow, obviously, especially in that mid-range area. But we're seeing some progression in the shooting. The other area we're seeing a lot of progression in is just the overall assertiveness. I've been impressed by his willingness to kind of take charge, lead huddles, and really step up on that end of the floor. At number 8, though, this was one of the players who we had the widest range of opinions on. Admittedly, he was not on my board at all. You guys both had him, I believe, top 5 or 6, and I'm talking about Jalen Hood-Schifino. So, Ebos, I'll start with you. What is it about Jalen Hood-Schifino that I know you've liked for a long time?
Jalen Hood-Schifino impacts winning. And not only does he impact winning, he impacts winning on both ends of the floor. He's a stud defender who can move all around the perimeter. He gets guys involved on the offensive end. Now, throughout a rough game in Maryland the other night, he's also been shooting the ball pretty well and has been able to carry the Indiana offense at times, which I don't think people expected of him, because at Montverde his senior year, he was in a situation where he wasn't really relied upon to be the man offensively. But I just think he's so good, versatile, so good on both ends of the floor. He's got mental toughness. He's got physical toughness. And I just think he's the type of guy you win with. And that's why I had him so high in my personal top 5.
Now, Trav, you had him higher than anyone. So make your pitch, because I didn't have him on my board. What am I missing?
It's all the things that Bossi just said. He impacts winning. He's very versatile. He can play on the ball. He can play off the ball. On both ends of the floor, he can defend three positions. He's extremely mature. He's an extremely hard worker. He really is having a really good season for Indiana. This is a kid that historically, for me personally, I never really classified as a shooter, but he has really put the work into the gym, and it is really paying off in a big way for the Hoosiers this season. So when you look across the board at all the freshmen this season, to me, he's been one of the most consistently impactful players, especially at this high major Big Ten level, and they're a top 25 team. So he's impacting winning, and he's producing.
All right, now rounding out the top 10 is Gigi Jackson at South Carolina and Jarris Walker at Houston. But there is one player who divided the group. You two were aligned again. Dariq Whitehead was not on either of your big boards. I've got him at number 3. So I'm going to make my case. Dariq Whitehead, we have not seen him healthy all year long. He goes down with the fractured foot in October, misses probably the most important month of practice leading up to a freshman season. To his credit, he came back. He clearly wasn't fully healthy, in my opinion, and then recently got hurt again. Now, I tweeted this the other day. How many other players in his shoes would have shut it down, maybe twice at this point, and said, you know what, I'm not going to further jeopardize my draft stock. But to his credit, he keeps fighting back, and he keeps trying to play. Now, I don't buy into him as the elite shot maker that was advertised in the preseason, but to me what he is a high-level competitor and an ideal, at the highest level, potentially a connector who's a ball mover, a multi-positional defender who can provide some spot scoring, but it's just the competitiveness that really stands out to me. So I will open this up to whoever wants to take it. Why is Dariq Whitehead off your board?
I'll jump in on this. To me, he's not even top. I would have definitely one other guy. So I'd have 2 total Duke players above him, Duke freshmen, Kyle Filipowski, we already talked about, and Tyrese Proctor. Dariq, yes, you are absolutely right. He missed the most important practices of the year in that month leading up to the start of the season. But when he came back, he was really having a hard time finding out who he was as a player in the month of December while he wasn't fully healthy. And it's really, really difficult. I always give these players the benefit of the doubt. It's an extremely difficult thing when you're injured to start the season to jump in the middle of December when teams are finding their rhythm and finding their rotations and who they are, and to jump in and really produce and be consistent. He struggled during that time, but in recent weeks, he has also been finding out who he is, and he has improved his play. But when I'm looking at these Duke freshmen, the guys who have been the best, Kyle Filipowski, hands down number 1. But in the past month, Tyrese Proctor with Jeremy Roach out, he's really coming into his own, and he is having some big-time plays in some big-time games, specifically last night with Wake Forest coming into town. And he had some really good moments and starting to excite some people around the industry.
All right, now we are going to continue to talk about the best freshmen in the country, but we're going to do it with a brand new segment. This segment called The Technical Foul, where one of us talks about what we're mad about this week. And so this segment is specifically designed for myself and Travis Branham, 2 of the more ornery analysts, so they say in the industry. So Trav, I'm going to give you first shot. What are you assessing a technical foul about this week?
To be honest with you, the technical foul has been put on myself for my evaluation of Noah Clowney. And maybe not so much my evaluation, but just the fact we had him in the back end 100, and now this kid is playing like a first-round pick already in year 1. Watching him a handful of times in high school live, one of the things that you always wanted to see out of him was just more effort, more intensity. He wasn't always the most productive out there, so it was really hard. The talent, all the tools, everything was there. He was honestly, what I would tell people, he was the scariest evaluation for me in the Southeast. And so when you're not seeing the production, you're not seeing the intensity every time, it really is a hard thing to bet on. And so now it's just become a moment for me, or for him, I would say, that it's just been a light bulb has gone off. It's really starting to click, and going to this Alabama program, he's flourishing. And so the technical foul is on myself. I am mad at myself for missing this one. And all credit goes to Noah Clowney. Well-deserved. Keep at it. And let's see if he can finish out the season this way.
One of college basketball's most storied rivalries returns this week when Duke and North Carolina meet up. And of course, this is a new iteration of this rivalry because we've got Hubert Davis in his second season at the helm of North Carolina and Jon Scheyer having officially taken over the program at Duke. So going to bring back in Travis Branham and Dariq Bossi to help me break down not only what's going to happen on the floor this weekend, but also what we've seen from these programs under their new head coaches and how it projects out long term. So Travis, I will start with you, and since you're wearing Carolina colors, we'll have you talk about Duke. What have you seen from Jon Scheyer? Obviously the recruiting, he's got 2 loaded classes that he's delivered, but what in recent months since he's taken over has really stood out to you?
Just his way to manage the situations that he's been dealt. This is a Duke team that has battled the injury bug, first with Dariq Whitehead and Dariq Whitehead going out to start the season. But then most importantly, you have Jeremy Roach, who went out earlier this month, or I guess I should say January. Their only key return, their only starter that came back from last year's team. So they have battled a lot of injuries. They've only lost 1 game when fully healthy, and I would put even an asterisk against that because you're still having a Dariq Whitehead and a Dereck Lively still coming back from injury. We said it earlier in the show; those were 2 guys at the time who weren't fully healthy as of now. So they're still going into this game, depending on Dariq Whitehead and the rest of this team's status, they could still be injured. But at the same time, it's allowed guys like Tyrese Proctor to really start to find his role and find his rhythm and flourish. And he's now playing on the ball with Jeremy Roach off the ball, who can now focus on his scoring, and it's really starting to pay off for this Duke team. So Jon Scheyer's really doing a good job. I know some Duke fans may be a little aggravated or frustrated just with the season, them falling outside the top 25, losing over a handful of games here. But all things considered, especially when we have talked about this so much, they had the #1 class, but not all classes are created equal. This was a freshman class across the board, across the country that we knew may not live up to the expectations that most of these classes do. So all things considered, I think they're doing a great job over there at Duke.
All right, now I have to ask this question, and Bossi, I will pose this to you because Travis makes a fair point about the overall depth of the 2022 recruiting class, but roster construction has to matter as well. And this has been a criticism of Kentucky over the years. It says, hey, they get the best players, but the best players don't always necessarily fit together. I'm not sure how well Duke's freshmen fit together. When you've got Lively, Filipowski, and Mark Mitchell all on the floor at the same time, you're essentially playing 3 bigs. And while Mark Mitchell has proven to be way more versatile on both ends of the floor than at least I ever expected, spacing has been a serious, serious problem for Duke this year because not even their guards are really, shooting it all that well. So how much of that falls on Jon Scheyer and roster construction, and how much of that do we say, you know what, he tried to get Trevor Keels back, they tried to get A.J. Green in the portal, and they just struck out on that last piece to complete this class?
Ultimately, it's got to go to the coach here, right? He's the guy who's in charge. He's the guy who's making the decisions. And he's the guy who's got to see all this potentially coming down the road. Now, obviously, we're talking about a first-year coach. Yeah, he got to learn from Mike Krzyzewski, maybe the greatest to ever do it, but it's still a lot different once you move that chair over and it's all on you. So I think that not only is it just about roster construction and the difficulty with playing Mitchell, Lively, and Filipowski together, but it's also about, I think we've moved into an era where it's going to be increasingly hard to be so reliant upon freshmen. There's a COVID hangover going on right now with these guys' development. There's a lot more on their table with NIL responsibilities and this and that going on. So I really think that finding some experience, which they did try and do, you brought in Young, you brought in Jacob Grandison. So they've tried to do that stuff. But at the end of the day, it all falls on the head coach because it's his job to put this team together. But I wouldn't trip out on Jon Scheyer too bad about it. He did what he tried to do, and it's at the end of the day, the guys have got to make shots. He can't go out there and make them for them. He probably wish he could put himself out there to make some shots. But that's where we are, and it's no one out there has a perfect roster. And I think as the season goes on, they're learning better how to deal with it. The difficulty is just that because of injury, they haven't been able to use all 3 of those guys together or figure out the proper rotations quite as well as they probably would have liked to at this point in the season.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. The problem is that John Shire's still the best shooter in the gym. All right, now let's turn the page a little bit. Hubert Davis makes that inspired run last year in the NCAA tournament. He's getting it done on the recruiting trail right now. He's got a pair of commitments in 2024 that may end up in 2023. Trav, I'll bring it back to you. What have you liked, what have you not liked about what we've seen from North Carolina so far this season?
When you have the preseason #1 team, I don't think you anticipate them dropping as many games as they've dropped, but they are playing much better over the last month. I just released a winners and losers today about the college basketball over the last month, and honestly, they just missed making it into that winners bracket for me. They are playing much better basketball, but when you have a team with Final Four experience, you want to see that play out on the floor on a consistent basis. There's no reason when you have one of the best bigs in the entire country, you have two extremely dynamic guards in Caleb Love and RJ Davis, for them to be have struggled up to this point the way they have. So again, they're playing better. Armando Bacot is still playing like one of the absolute best bigs in the entire country. And also Pete Nance is starting to come around a little bit. He had a big game the other night with 21 points. So come Saturday, the experience is something that I think could play a big, big factor in this showdown.
It's going to be very interesting, speaking of experience, if we can ever see the best of Caleb Love like we did at the end of last season. Fellas, I know we are all on the road this weekend. Thank you for your time. Ebos, we will see you soon. Trav, stick around. You got one more upcoming announcement to break down for us. Prospects in the class of 2024 are continuing to fly off the board, and this week we're expecting another announcement from Labaron Philon. He's going to follow in the likes of Elijah Moore, who committed to Syracuse last week, and Tahad Pettiford, who committed to Auburn. For more on what Philon may be thinking and what type of player he is, here's Travis Branham.
Labaron Philon is one of the top point guards in the entire Southeast and in the entire country. He ranks number 40 nationally, and he is down to 6 schools, which include Alabama, an in-state program, Auburn, Arkansas, Kansas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. This is a dynamic point guard who's tremendous both as a scorer and as a playmaker. The schools that we have been keeping the close eye on in this recruitment are the schools locally in the Southeast, specifically Alabama and Auburn. So can Auburn reel in a second top 40 guard in the class of 2024 in the same week? Tune in on Friday at 12:30 Central Time to find out.
That's it for the College Basketball Recruiting Weekly. Thank you so much again to everybody who continues to tune in. We are continuing to raise the bar, and we're going to do it each and every week. So be sure to stay locked in on 247sports.com and the 24/7 Sports channel. In the last week alone, we had 2 live announcements. We had countless articles on both college basketball and recruiting, not to mention the NBA draft. And oh yeah, college football, they crushed signing day. So be sure to stick with us again this week for all the local news, notes across the nation. Until next time.